Hi, I'm Dr. Sam Hazledine, and today I'm here with Dr. Danielle Jones, also known as Mama Dr. Jones. Dr. Jones is an American OB-GYN and a science communicator. Danielle is a multi-channel social influencer. Across her YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, she has more than 2 million followers. So I'm going to be really interested to find out how she grew that and how she uses that today. She used her platform to answer difficult questions, to clear up medical misinformation, of which we know there's a lot right now on those particular platforms, and to do demonstrations. She's got 4 children and soon is making the move to New Zealand to work in Invercargill. So welcome, Danielle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's fantastic to have you here. Let's just start with what's prompted you move down to New Zealand.
Yeah, so we visited New Zealand for the first time in 2011, and after that we just had fallen in love with it, and we really, even then, decided hopefully someday we can make the move and spend, at least a year or 2 there. And then when I finished my medical training, we actually went again and took the kids with us to the South Island. We did an RV trip around the South Island, hiking and just doing all the outdoor stuff that you can do. And they loved it also. And we just really fell in love with the culture and the pace of life and the people and obviously the beautiful land and things to do outside, and decided to start trying to make the move. So this was the first year that we could actually start applying for jobs just because of how medical training and licensing works. And unfortunately, that fell during a pandemic, and so the prospects for getting into the country were relatively low. The Invercargill job opened up, and I applied, and the people at Southland Hospital were wonderful, and I just thought it would be a really great team to work with, and that's how we ended up with accepting the job in Invercargill.
Yeah, no, you're right. They are a great team to work with down there. I've worked in Invercargill in Kew Hospital myself, and it's one of those hospitals that's big enough to have what you need, but small enough that you get to know everyone and get to do a few things, that you wouldn't normally do. So it's a great place, and obviously in a great part of the world. Danielle, why did you choose to become a doctor in the first place?
My journey into medicine is a little different than most people. I went to undergrad university here is separate from medical school. So you do that first and then you apply to medical schools after that. And my plan was to go into psychology and maybe be a clinical psychologist. And I decided a little bit into that I didn't really think that was for me. And at the same time, my stepdad was actually experiencing some pretty significant health complications and needed a double lung transplant. And as he was very, very sick and we sat at his bedside, I just looked at the people and thought, the difference in good care and bad care is just how it's delivered. And I could be a good deliverer of healthcare. I can learn the science side, but I want to be a good doctor. I want to provide good care to families going through things that are, terrible or, sometimes wonderful. And so I decided to apply for medical school at that time, and that's how I ended up here.
Fantastic. And how do you keep that now that you're a practicing doctor? Because a lot of medical students do start with almost all of us start with those sort of ideals. And as we know, over 50% of doctors are currently in burnout. And one of the, my research, one of the main protective factors I've found against burnout is purpose. Remembering why we got into this in the first place. How do you keep that purpose front of mind, that moment sitting beside your father's bed?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things really that come in here. And the first of them for me is just very strongly protecting my time. I have not worked full-time, which full-time in the U.S. is a little different than other places, but most of the doctors in the practice I joined after residency were working 60 hours a week with their call. And I decided right then, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to work part-time. And so I very much protected my time. When I wasn't on call, I wasn't working. I wasn't going to, come in if I wasn't supposed to be there. Finish all my charts before I leave, which is pretty unusual in healthcare. And the second part of that is, like you said, kind of staying plugged into what your purpose is in medicine. I feel like the internet helped me do that a lot. There's kind of 2 sides to the internet. I do a lot of content creation and education, but there's also a side where you can listen to people's stories. And so I actually, when I first got on the internet, started by just kind of joining like infertility communities and miscarriage communities and listening to the stories and people saying like, this doctor did this thing that made everything so much worse. It was the worst day of my life and they just, hurt me more. And listening to that helps me understand how to deliver care in a way that even if I can't make someone better, at least I will never be the one who makes it worse. Or that's the goal. Obviously, we're not all perfect, but...
Absolutely. So is that how you got into social media? Or you just started, joining groups and getting involved in conversations?
Yeah, that was back in medical school. I actually got involved in social media like in 2009, and it was very odd back then as a medical student to be blogging your way through med school or be on Twitter, and it wasn't very well accepted, and people thought it was very unusual. But it was kind of a creative outlet. I liked to write, and so I just wrote about my experiences, and I quickly realized that Twitter was a really great place both for learning and for connecting, and I would often be more up to date on new literature that had come out than many of my friends in school because I would see a tweet about it because I followed certain doctors, and it was great for learning. So that was kind of like my first dipping my toes into social media. And then I took a break while I was in residency. My twins were 6 months old when I started my intern year, and I was like, I have time for two things. I need to be a great mom when I'm at home. I need to be a great mom when I'm at the hospital. So kind of took a break then and restarted when I graduated.
Yeah, right. And did you have aspirations when you started building your social media channels, or did you have an idea where it was going, or tell me about that?
Yeah, not way back then. Back then it was really genuinely just a creative outlet. When I started in 2017 under kind of the Mama Dr. Jones brand that you see now, it was on Instagram, and my goal really was just to educate and to advertise my practice because I couldn't do any like formal advertising, and I thought it would be good community outreach. Really quickly, I figured out that there was a lot of growth happening that I hadn't anticipated. And so when I realized I was kind of onto something, then I started making goals. When I started the YouTube channel, it definitely was very intentional. I had goals. I never thought it would be what it is today, where I have almost 1 million subscribers, and it's just insane. But I certainly had some goal direction when I started that one.
Yeah, okay. And so tell me, obviously you saw an opportunity with social media, starting with to promote your practice. But social media is obviously different from real life. And I imagine there are some things that you can do better in social media, and some things that obviously you can't do in social media. What do you find? How do you find those platforms? What can you do better in those platforms that you maybe can't do in person?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think social media for me, even if I was able to replace my income, would ever be a replacement for clinical medicine because I love being at the bedside. But I do feel like social media is much better, especially once you've figured out how to communicate science and how to reach people and how to build a platform for reaching, way more people than you ever could on a clinical basis. I have a reach now that is probably on a single post more than I would ever reach in my entire clinical career, which is a huge opportunity and a big responsibility. But just, as a small example, talking about the COVID vaccination and the importance and safety in pregnancy, as we've experienced the pandemic in the United States, has been really, really valuable because people weren't really getting congruent information from their OBs. And they needed a place to go where they could have someone really sit down and explain the science. And you just don't always have that much time in a clinic visit. So I think it's been really, really helpful from that standpoint.
Yeah, no doubt. What do you think is it about you and your style that's really you've blown this thing up and grown to 2 million followers? I mean, obviously I've watched a few of your videos. You use a bit of humor. Yeah. I definitely would identify my brand of teaching as edutainment. So it's meant to be, entertaining, and you leave having accidentally learned something. And I think one of the reasons that it works is that I've always tried to take a very kind of laid back approach, that anytime I'm not ever like the stuffy white coat doctor that's just talking down to you. I always kind of wanted my presence online to be like if your best friend happened to be a gynecologist and you were at
coffee talking about pap smears for some reason. And I think that's why it works. People want to be on, the same level as you. They don't want to be made to feel stupid. They want you to talk to them like they're real people, because they are. And I hope that has been part of why I can successfully reach people.
Yeah, no doubt. But that's not necessarily the style of all doctors. And I imagine you've had your detractors at times, have you?
Absolutely. It's not even the style of all doctors on the internet, and it does sometimes negatively impact the opportunities I get in mainstream media, because they kind of want that uppity, doctor on CNN or whatever. But I feel like my reach on a person-to-person level is so much bigger that I don't care. And yeah, everybody doesn't love it. And I've even had some patients, most of my patients absolutely love it. A lot of my patients find me from what I do online, but some people have, been uncomfortable. They don't want to know more about their doctor's life. They don't want to, hear your personal take. They just want, the information. So that's fine. It doesn't have to be for everyone, but I think it's doing a good job online.
Yeah. What are some? I mean, have you had any specific examples that really impacted you with your interactions online from some of the content you've created?
Yeah, I mean, I get feedback all the time. I'll get emails that are saying, I've never gotten a pap smear and I went because now I understand why it's important. That doesn't have to be horrible and painful. The transgender community has been incredibly helpful to me in discussing how to use more gender neutral language, especially in talking about a field that has so traditionally been extremely gendered. And I've learned a lot from them. And then transitioning my language to be more inclusive has brought a lot of benefits in the way of people saying, this is the only place I feel like I can come and learn about gynecologic health as a trans man or as a non-binary person who is assigned female at birth, because everywhere else just gives me such bad dysphoria. And I think that it's really important that those people have equal access to education, and that's been, really helpful to me, and I hope also to the community.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. I mean, it does sound very positive, and obviously you've got this platform to impact like literally millions of people. Has it come, with a downside to you personally at all?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, there's a few of those. Not the least of which is just how hateful people can be sometimes. People certainly, especially right now, there's a lot of hate-fueled posts towards doctors, especially people talking about COVID vaccinations and treatments and things like that.
Well, we're all in. We're all in on the worldwide conspiracy, obviously, along with big business and media and government.
That's what gets me too. I'm like, okay, so on one hand, the COVID vaccine it's going to take out the whole planet because it's meant for population control. But what good why would they want to kill their entire country? What good would that? And then we can't work, can't produce anything. Like, this is capitalism. They don't want to kill you.
Of course not. Of course not. If anything, they've rushed it so they're not losing any of their customers. But
exactly.
You only have to scratch that's the thing, is you only have to scratch below the surface to see the logic about it. But that's the interesting thing. And we've only really seen it in the past few years, haven't we? This blowing up on Facebook, and particularly on Facebook, of just ludicrous stuff.
I mean, I think it's always been around. It's just always been such a small voice that they didn't have a place to kind of congregate and make it more known. We've always had the people who thought 9/11 was an inside job and the earth is flat, and the moon landing didn't happen. I mean, all of these conspiracies that have always been around. So I think they're still a minority. I just think they're a lot louder now with the internet, and that's okay. The extreme people are not ever my goal of who I want to talk to on the internet. I want the people who are not the people who agree with me, and not the people who are extreme. I want the people in the middle who are confused because they keep hearing these things from different sides and they don't know what to believe. The people who are sitting on the fence just unable to move because people on both sides are screaming at them. That's who I want to talk to.
And that's really interesting, because a lot of people seek an audience that think like them. And you self-select into an audience where you put your posts up and it's all high fives and wow, you're amazing, because you've only got an audience that thinks like you. But obviously seeking out an audience that maybe doesn't think like you would come with its challenges, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think anytime you have an audience this big, it's going to be a challenge, and there's going to be people who disagree with you on certain things. And I think me being very transparent about, when I'm sharing something, if this is like a personal belief or if this is a science-based belief, and being really clear about things that, it's helped me too to understand a little bit more why people want to have home births and how racism plays into medicine. And I think it's good. I think the diversity in who follows me and who feels compelled and welcome to speak up about things that I talk about has helped me as well.
Yeah, no doubt. How do you sort of you talked earlier about compartmentalizing your medicine and family life. How do you compartmentalize your online life as well? Because that could be a rabbit hole that you could just head on down.
Honestly, this is one of the things I still struggle with a lot. It's kind of this like constantly in the back of your head, and as you have more presence, more places, you feel like you also are constantly contacted. And so someone may ask you a question that seems, benign enough to them, like, where should I know you're from Texas, who should I see in whatever city? And I'm like, if 2 million people ask me this, I'll never be able to create content. And so it's hard, and they don't know that, and that's okay, but it says sometimes like weighs on me and stays in the back of my head all the time. I'm constantly checking messages. So you see
questions that you just know you can't get to and you'll never answer.
Oh, absolutely. I used to try to respond to everyone, and I had to switch to, okay, I'll try to read at least all of them, and now it's just like I do my best, but I probably get 1,000 or 2,000 messages a week, and that doesn't even count, comments on videos and things like that. So it's impossible now.
Do you have any staff to help you with that?
I have one person who I hired about a year ago, and she mainly runs a Facebook page, so she's totally in charge of anything that goes up on the Facebook page, which is generally just old content from YouTube. And she's done an excellent job of building our platform over there. She also kind of helps keep me organized. She's technically my production manager, but she doesn't do like traditional production stuff. She's more helping with organizing ideas. If we have anything that needs research that's not like the medical side of research, so looking into writing a script for something, she'll help with that. And she's been really, really good just for kind of keeping me focused. But other than that, it's just me. Probably 99% of everything that gets done happens with me.
I mean, that's pretty incredible, isn't it, when you put that in context? You've got an audience half the size of New Zealand. I mean, we're not a big place down here, but we're half the size of New Zealand you're potentially engaging with. You're a doctor, you're a mum. That's a huge feat. That's incredible.
It is. It's probably time that I start hiring a couple more people. That would help me out a lot.
You think? Yeah, I'd say so. Now, I mean, I think it's an interesting space, and I really like seeing doctors who who create a platform firstly, and then use it to educate sanely. And I think doing it in a fun way. You've got to do it in a way that is going to engage people. There are a lot of people who have just taken the stand and are just educating like with very little qualification and giving some terrible advice. And the word influencer kind of has started to encapsulate a lot of these people. How does that impact what you do, or do you have views on that?
Yeah, so I will say they provide a lot of content for me, and I've also learned a lot from them, not the medical stuff that they inappropriately teach, but how to write posts in a way that get them shared and make them viral. And so I actually try to follow along to some of those accounts who share really bad information, because they tend to be really good at sharing it in a way that makes people want to push it out to other people. And so I take some notes from their book, and then that can also give me content to debunk their myths. So I I like to spend some time teaching my audience a little bit of media literacy, like how to identify if somebody is trying to take advantage of you. Are they selling supplements? So if they're anti-COVID vaccine and you go on their website and they're selling, vitamin D and ivermectin or whatever they're selling on their website, then they may have, an ulterior motive.
Yeah.
Or if they're selling a course about period hormones that, this is everything your doctor didn't tell you. And, these people often are easy to identify once you know what to look for.
Yeah, no doubt. What advice would you give to any doctors thinking about this? I mean, we're in a world now where this is an opportunity for doctors. It's an opportunity to create a platform. It's an opportunity to educate or entertain or whatever. But what advice would you give to any doctor, I guess, who's thinking about it, who doesn't know quite where to start, or but feels like this is a path that they might like to go along?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. One is you got to figure out who you're talking to, and I think once you figure out who you're talking to, what you're going to talk about comes pretty easily. But also, for me, I think the reason I've been so successful on so many different platforms has been because I have a genuine interest in social media marketing, and I start out my platforms by listening to podcasts or YouTube videos about how to be successful on whatever platform we're jumping into. And I just genuinely, I really like doing it. So this is my hobby. So you have to enjoy it. I don't think anybody's ever going to grow a platform if they don't like doing it and they don't like learning about the analytics and things like that. And if they do, it's going to drive them crazy, because putting up with all the negatives that come along with it just isn't going to be worth it if you don't like doing it. So find something you're passionate about, you love talking about, figure out who you're talking to, and learn the community, learn the algorithm, learn the platform, and then just keep showing up consistently. I think that's the number one thing, is people sometimes start and then they don't keep showing up because it's a thankless job in the beginning. But keep showing up and you'll build.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, exponential growth looks very flat to start with, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
And I imagine that, for years you could potentially be doing a lot of work to a very small audience. But if it just keeps growing and keeps building.
And if you create valuable content will grow your platform. So people often get really focused on, the ins and outs of everything. But if your primary goal is making sure you're creating valuable content, I often see doctors who seem to think that just because they are really smart or they are really well trained or they have, what they think are really great things to say, that people just should listen to it or they should show up or their platform should grow. And it's just not the case. There's a lot of really smart people out there who have really good things to say. You have to create content that is valuable to the person that you're talking to.
And that's clearly what you've done. And if anyone listening or watching this, goes and checks out any of your channels, it's definitely edutainment. I mean, I sort of, I enjoy just flicking through. I like the way, I liked your one, about COVID, and the people saying we've got our own immune systems, and you said, yeah, that's true, but pretty helpful when Armageddon comes to have some help.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't seem afraid to shy away from a direct fight, but correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you pick fights with the ideas rather than people.
Usually, hopefully that's the goal. I don't know that I could say I've 100% been successful in that, but that's the goal. I learned early on, never fight in the comments. You will never make a difference in the comments. Take it to your own platform. If you want to debunk something, you want to talk about something, do it on your own turf. Otherwise, it will only make you crazy and not make much of a difference.
That's a really good insight, isn't it? Rather than getting into a fight with an individual, which just goes on forever, because you go, well, here's what I think, and they go, here's what I think, and they go, but you go, but here's what I know how that goes, and we've all gone down those rabbit holes.
Yeah.
With people who seem very ignorant in a situation, but they probably think, you're very ignorant, so it goes both ways.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's an interesting point. You bring it to your platform.
Yeah, and I think, oftentimes whatever comment that person has made that, you would have taken up a fight with, which don't get me wrong, I've done that plenty of times. I just try not to do it anymore. usually the people who are on your platform and exactly who are reading what you post will have maybe had that thought and just never put it out there, and they weren't as, extreme about it. They're maybe kind of more in the middle. And then once you say, like, here's why this is not accurate, and then you've actually encouraged somebody to challenge their bias or think about what they felt about something, and it's way more useful and way better for your blood pressure.
No doubt. That's a really interesting sort of, you didn't do psychology, but it's an interesting psychological bit of jiu-jitsu there is, the moment, a lot of people will put stuff, they may not really think it, but the moment you go into attack, you push, they push back. And so what you actually could do in those situations, while you think you're doing good, is actually what you're doing is forcing them into a corner where they have to defend themselves. Whereas if you were to look at it something like that and then create a better piece of content that actually delivers it, they don't look at it and go, that's directed directly at me. So they can, they don't have the guard up, and they could actually learn and potentially change their mind. That's really interesting. Yeah, I could learn from that.
I should take my own advice more often, but I think it's a good habit to start early.
Oh, look, it's a great ideal. Sometimes it's like a red rag at a bull, though, isn't it? And you're like, right.
Exactly.
Well, and then you're never happy that you go down. Like even when you start it, you know where it's going to end up.
Yeah, I mean, it never ends with you feeling like that was worth my time.
Yeah, no, exactly. How would you? I guess the other piece I'd ask about from a doctor perspective is you say you've got to have a purpose. You've got to really have a message, I guess, or something you really believe in. Because I imagine consistency with that message is important. You can't just be sort of, I'm a general doctor, I'm just going to give you, I'm going to talk about obstetrics to this week and orthopedics next week. You probably need to niche. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that's always my first recommendation when someone's trying to start a platform is to niche down. And most of us, even general practitioners, have something that they're really passionate about. And it doesn't have to necessarily be just one, health topic. It can be, I really like talking to people who are 20 to 30, and that would be, anything that affects that person. And so I always tell people, create an avatar, which in social media marketing is just like the person that you're talking to. Imagine them. How old are they? Is it a man or a woman or both? Is it, someone who's educated or still in school or not educated? And just have a really good picture of it so that when you close your eyes, you can think, I'm just sitting here talking to that person. Because then your messaging is so much easier to create because you know who you're talking to, and it comes across like that when you post.
Yeah, no doubt. And then how about fitting it in terms of creating the content? Are you planning your content, or do you sort of have an idea and then pull out your phone, you're on the wards, whatever? Are you integrating content creation into your day?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't. I mean, unless I'm like on a 24-hour shift and just have downtime, I definitely don't tend to do things like that at work. But I would say early on in building the Instagram, I would just make sure that I found something to talk about each night. So every night after my kids went to bed, I would write a post. And a lot of times it would be something I had discussed with a patient in clinic that week, or something that had been in the media or what have you. Now that the Instagram is big and I don't really care if it grows, I just get on there when I have something to say. And so I just post when I feel like it. The same with TikTok. TikTok's just fun for me. Sometimes I post, sometimes I go away for a long time. For YouTube, it's definitely very planned. And that's the thing with YouTube, is that it has to be, because it takes way longer to create and edit and post that content. It also has a longer life, which is why I got on YouTube to begin with, because on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok and all of these little platforms, whatever you create, it lives for 24 or 48 hours, and you can relink back to it, but it's not going to be searchable. People don't just, organically find it. So the beautiful thing about YouTube is that it's a search engine, and people go there to learn things. And so someone may be finding my very first video right now and watching it, and that's why I love that platform. But yeah, I usually plan those out in advance, and I try to film in batches. So I'll find, like, we live right now in Airbnbs. We're nomadic, and so usually I don't have like a place that I can film. So a lot of times, once or twice a month, I'll just rent another Airbnb away from my kids and just go film 3 or 4 videos at a time to kind of streamline the process.
Yeah, right. Do you think that's an interesting point? Because I hadn't thought about that, but obviously that's very true. Like, YouTube is a content creation platform that, lives on forever. Do you think it's important if a doctor's building a social media presence to be across all the platforms?
I wouldn't start out trying to be everywhere, because you need to be comfortable with whatever you're doing, and it's too much work. I usually don't show up on all the platforms all the time. It's typically one this week, one next week. So I would start out focused on one that you think you can really enjoy building, and then once you're comfortable there and it's not requiring as much oversight, if you want to branch out into a new platform, then that makes sense.
Yeah, okay, that's good. What haven't I asked you about for doctors in social media that I should have?
I don't know. I think that was a great conversation. I'm super passionate about it just because I just love doing it, and I think everybody has a place, and the more doctors that we get online, the more reliable healthcare professionals we have speaking about evidence-based medicine, the better. And they're like the OBGYN community on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. We're all friends and we support each other. It's not competitive. Like, there is enough room for everybody.
That's something I think that's a really unique and powerful part of being a doctor, is we are collegial. And we share information, and we like to see other people's success, which is quite different from a lot of industries, which are more business focused, so they're more protective and more keep things to their chests, and that's a good observation. Danielle, if you could go back in time and give your 18-year-old self some advice, what would you say are the 3 most important things that you've learned personally that you would share with your 18-year-old self?
I definitely would tell myself to learn Spanish, because that would be extremely valuable working in South Texas.
See.
But on a practical...
I learned a bit of Spanish because my daughters love Dora, so...
That's about the extent of mine too, and it doesn't go very far when I'm trying to coach someone through a labor.
No. Vámonos, let's go.
Exactly. But yeah, I think I would tell myself to, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to, I put a lot of pressure on myself as a kid, and I still tend to be a little bit of a perfectionist. Like, it comes into social media too, that sometimes you just have to hit publish and go forward, and nothing is going to be perfect. My kids have a book called Ish, and it's a book about how it's okay for things to be perfect-ish. You don't have to always focus on having everything in order, and that's helped them a lot, but I think it's helped me just as much. And I would tell myself, you're smarter than you give yourself credit for. Just do what you feel like is right and follow your gut, and you'll make it.
Those are 3 great pieces of advice. Well, look, Danielle, I really appreciate your time today. I've learned a lot. I think it's been really interesting, and I think, given the world we live in, it's a really interesting topic for doctors to learn about from someone who's obviously very, very successful in the space, and starting with purpose, finding your niche, being consistent, leaning into it, and learning about it. I think that's all fantastic advice, and it'd be really exciting to see where you go from here. Tell me, finally, how would you like to be remembered?
Well,
it's a long way to go. I'm not suggesting. You beat COVID.
I hope that people think of me as someone who was a good mother and a good person. That's my only goal. And if I can add in there a good educator who made a difference in people's lives from a health standpoint, then I would love that as well. But my primary goal in life is just to be a good person and to be a good mom.
Well, fantastic. It sounds like you're doing that, and you're going to be a great asset to New Zealand when we eventually let you in.
Thank you. If you have any connections to the government, let them know. We're ready to get our MIQ spots.
We're a small place. We've all got Jacinda's home phone number, so.
Oh, good, because I was hoping she would be my best friend when we get there. So just let her know.
Yeah, don't worry. You'll be besties, by Christmas.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for your time today. It's been really fantastic.
Thank you. Good chatting.